Hello and welcome to Project Oneness World. Today we are speaking with Professor Carol Tenopir. Carol is a Chancellor's Professor Emerita at the School of Information Sciences at the University of Tennessee-Knoxville and recently served as the school's interim director until her retirement in August 2021. Professor Carol Tenopir holds a PhD degree in Library and Information Science from the University of Illinois, from where she also received an Outstanding Alumnus Award. She is well known for her work in information access and retrieval, electronic publishing, and the information industry. A highly cited author with over 200 journal articles and 5 books, she has over 15,000 citations as per Google Scholar. Professor Tenopir is a frequent speaker at national and international conferences. She has won numerous awards, including the 2019-2020 Mace Bearer Award, the highest award bestowed on a faculty member at the University of Tennessee, the 2009 Award of Merit, the highest award given out by ASIS&T, the Association for Information Science and Technology, the 2004 International Information Industry Lifetime Achievement Award, the 2002 ASIS&T Research Award, and teaching awards from ASIS&T and ALICE. She was also inducted in her High School Hall of Fame in Whittier, California. She has had 3 Fulbright Awards to Finland, most recently serving as the Fulbright Nokia Distinguished Chair in Information and Communications Technologies, Hanken School of Economics in 2016 and 17. She and her husband Gerald Lundin have now moved to Michigan to live with their son and daughter-in-law, both working at Michigan State University, and spend winters at the family ranch in California. And you may not remember this, Professor Tenopir, and I checked my email to confirm the date, but on October 28, 2008, you interviewed me at the ASIS annual meeting when I was just finishing my PhD and applying for faculty positions. And now, many years later, on May 24th, 2022, after exactly 13 and a half years, I get to interview you now. So welcome, Professor Tenopir. So I'd like to start with my first question as asking you about telling me your story in your own words.
How about if I tell you about my professional story, and some of it gets personal too, but let me start with when I graduated from college. So I was probably a sophomore or junior in college at Whittier College, and I guess it was a sophomore. I needed to declare a major. And I was interested in so many different things. I was interested in science. I was interested in history. I was interested in English literature. I was interested in medieval studies, all different things. And I was working as a student assistant in the library. And the librarian at the time, Phil O'Brien, said to me, he said, have you ever thought about getting a master's in library science? Then it doesn't matter what you major in. So she said, done. So I'm probably the only one who ever had a major in medieval literature, history, with the cognate area of sciences. So I took whatever I wanted to take, which was really, really nice. I took a little bit of everything, and that meant that I could just enjoy learning and enjoy everything. And then I started my master's. I started my master's in library science immediately after I finished my bachelor's, which is, I know, fairly unusual. We have some students who do that, but most do not. So that was sort of my motivation for doing that. Everybody in my family had assumed, that I'd be a teacher. I come from a family of teachers and college administrators and things, but I rebelled, saying I was going to be a librarian. So that was my rebellion. But when I was in school, my very favorite classes, when I was in my master's program, were computer programming, which I had not had before, and online searching. And this was mid-70s. And I graduated from college in 74.
I'm curious what programming languages you were taught.
Fortran.
Fortran, okay.
I don't think people even learn Fortran anymore.
Yes,
but,
and COBOL as well. Was there COBOL along with Fortran?
COBOL later, but there it was Fortran, and it was for library applications. Fortran, and I thought this was, it just made so much sense. And the online searching, it was a miracle to me. It was just absolutely seemed natural. I loved it. And so when I graduated, I took a job with a small woman-owned consulting company run by Pamela Cibarelli and Associates. We were very small. I took a chance, but I was young, because if we didn't have contracts, we didn't get paid. So we spent a lot of evenings writing proposals. But the work that we did was based out of Orange County, California. We worked for pharmaceutical firms, land development, engineering firms mostly. We also had some government contracts. And we did indexing and abstracting of laboratory notebooks, engineering drawings, corporate reports, all those kind of ephemera and special materials. And then we had a programmer staff. I was not the programmer, but knew enough to what was happening, and offered them a retrieval system. I mean, we're talking bibliographic retrieval here. The documents were still in paper, but this was new for most of them. Again, we're talking mid-70s. So it seems a long time ago now when you talk about it. It was really a paper-based world, and offering a retrieval system was pretty revolutionary. And then the other thing I got to do is I got to be in charge of doing the online searching for the clients. So we offered a kind of reference service. If they had a library and people were on vacation, we'd help them out, or we did the online searching, because most of them in those days didn't know how to do online searching. So I got to do all the online searching, which I loved. It was, in those days, it was Dialog, Medline, SDC Orbit, and later added Westlaw, Lexis actually first, like BRS. Anyway, a whole bunch of online services. And again, it probably sounds quaint, but we had to do it for people. But yeah, and it was bibliographic searching. It was not. We did some directory databases, but you still had to then track down the documents. So there was a document delivery aspect to it too. So that was fun. Working at a small company like that, you learn so much so fast. I learned about proposal writing. I learned about indexing. I learned about conversion, automation, all of these, working in all different kinds of corporations, special libraries. We had a contract with a public library doing conversion. So I learned a whole lot real fast. So it was definitely worth the risk of, I was looking at my financials the other day when I retired, and I noticed my first year there, I made $7,000. So I did take a real risk. Wow, it went up after that, but it was good. And then in 1979, I moved to Hawaii, the University of Hawaii, became the systems automation librarian. Again, maybe dating myself, but we had just changed to OCLC copy cataloging, and there were piles of cards piled all over the floor when I got there. They didn't know they couldn't file as fast as they could catalog. Right. And so my role there was to help them figure out what the heck to do, how to get the cards filed, but it became clear that it was time to abandon cards. They made sure they were shipping these cards, all the way across the ocean from Ohio to Hawaii. It was kind of silly. So our first transition was a transition. So we started a microfiche catalog the stuff from like 1979 or 80 on was microfiche. And then if you wanted to look for older things, you had to search in the card catalog. So people had to search two different places. So it was quite, I had already left before we got everything back, files and converted, but it was the very beginning. So I was in the very beginning of online searching in 70, really widespread in the beginning of library automation. So that was pretty fun, really getting involved in that. Yeah, but the part I liked best at that Hawaii job was research, but also I taught the online searching class for the library school. My then husband was a faculty member in the library school at Hawaii, and so I spent a lot of time with the students, and they didn't have anybody who could teach online searching, so I did the online searching class, and I loved that, loved teaching. And so together, he and I decided that I would go back and get my PhD.
Okay.
when I was the librarian in Hawaii. So went back to Illinois, as you know. My husband had a sabbatical that first year, so he was able to join me that first year, which would have been 81, 82, I guess. And then he went back and I stayed. We knew that we were going to have to find a place that would have 2 openings. So, it was kind of a chance. We were taking a chance, me going back, but we both knew that that's what I really liked research. I liked writing. And so it was a good chance. And while I was there, I had already gotten, I guess, enough experience and I don't know if notoriety is the right word, but I had already done enough with the online database world that when I was a doctoral student in Illinois, I got a call from John Barry, who was the editor of Library Journal. And he said, I think we need to start putting more automation stuff in Library Journal. He said, and you know about online databases and you've been recommended, would you write a column about online databases? He said, I think it won't last more than a year or 2.
Okay.
But yeah, but give it a try. We'll see if people are still interested, if they're still around, whatever. And I did that for 28 years.
So yeah, I was thinking,
Yeah.
Kids, yeah.
It lasted more than a year or 2. So I did it for 20. And then I decided I needed to go another direction. That's another story. But anyway, yes, it lasted. So that was a good place to be. While I was at Illinois, the second year, I started looking around for positions because we knew that at some point we were going to have to find 2. My husband was willing to move, or I was, but it turned out Hawaii had an opening in the library school that was for records management, which is something else I'd done with Cibarelli and Associates, and online searching and indexing and abstracting. It was like it was made for me. So luckily enough, I was able to get on the faculty at Hawaii. So I should have mentioned while I was at Illinois, worked with first year, worked with Linda Smith in the online searching class. So I did all of the labs. And the second year, worked with Martha Williams, who was the editor of the biggest database directory in the world. And so I got lots of experience with databases there and the research surrounding them. So that was a really good experience at Illinois too. So then I was on the faculty of Hawaii, and after about 10 years, my husband had some health problems, which are all resolved now, but he was eligible for early retirement. We knew that'd be difficult in Hawaii, and so kind of just started putting some feelers out. And in the meantime, Jose Marie Griffiths and her husband Don King had moved to Tennessee. Okay. And I've known him from ASIS. ASIS is a big part of my life. I forgot to tell you that my husband and I met at an ASIS meeting too.
Which year and which place was it?
It was 1979 mid-year meeting in Banff, Canada. Wow. So we met there in May. I moved to Hawaii in July, and we got married in August.
Wonderful.
It was a fast track.
So that's a great ASIS story.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I don't know how much of this personal stuff I should say. I went home. He went home. I got a call from the associate university librarian in Hawaii and said, "I've heard that you might be willing to come to Hawaii." And I said, and she said, "Do you remember me?" Just like I interviewed you. She said, "I interviewed you for a job at OCLC when you were at Cibarelli, and you turned us down." They made the mistake of bringing this California girl to Columbus, Ohio in February. So I said, "No, thank you." Went to Hawaii. And she said, "I've got a job. I'd love to have you come to Hawaii if you move here." So it all kind of, the stars aligned anyway. Right. So anyway, he took early retirement from Hawaii. We moved to Tennessee, and then I was at Tennessee for 26 years. So I stick with things. And,
right.
Yeah. And it was a great move. It was very difficult move. It was very difficult to leave Hawaii. For us, for our son, who was just turning 9 at the time, but Tennessee has been a great place to be. And it was really good because my interests, I got to work with Don, switched my research from the online database world a little bit to the focusing more on the user scientists and how scientists use journals and how they find information. So it wasn't completely switched. It was more focused on research into the scientists themselves. Tennessee was a great place to be there for that, because not only was Don there, but for a while, but Oak Ridge National Lab right there. So we had a whole group of scientists that we could study. So it was really good decision.
What is the journey like after that? That is since last year, right?
Yeah, so I stayed at Tennessee my whole career. I went there was already a full professor of Hawaii, so I went to Tennessee as a professor with the idea of teaching, which I love, and research, which I love. I've been fighting off administration my entire career, but it kind of came up from behind and grabbed me. When I joined at Tennessee, we were an independent, just a school, not part of a college. And there was a reorganization in 2001, 2002, where they wanted fewer independent units, more collaborative units. And so we formed a new college that was, the administration let us kind of make the decisions, which was good, but it was information sciences, journalism, what was called broadcasting at the time, now it's electronic media, advertising, public relations, and communications. And we all came together to form a new college. And the provost at the time said, I want you to run the research center for the whole college and make it something for the entire college. Information sciences that had this real tight relationship with Oak Ridge National Lab and had a lot of research, but which I didn't run that research and didn't found it, but he wanted to expand it, make faculty more involved, and make it for the whole college. So I said, I'll do it for a year.
Right.
Yeah, but I want the title of interim. Well, after about 3 years, they said, listen, we're playing games here, let's take the interim off. So I actually did that for 11 years and then came back and did it again when there was a need. So I ended up as an administrator. And then the last year I postponed retirement to be the director again, because there was a need. Administration was never my first love. Research and teaching were always, but I did having said that, I think if I added up at Tennessee, probably 13 years out of my 20 something where I was an administrator, maybe more.
Yeah. So now that you are retired, right, and we'll get to your retirement in a little while, I want to take you back to your childhood now.
Okay.
From the middle part. So I think, and that's I think you can that could be a mix of your school going years as well as your personal time there. But when you recall now, tell us about your childhood and your growing up years.
So I mentioned that we were a family of educators. So and also Whittier College people. So my dad and mom both were graduates of Whittier College. When I was born, or just around then, my dad he had been a teacher. They're both teachers. My mom was an elementary school teacher. My dad had been a high school history teacher at Whittier High School. But he was recruited by Whittier College to come back for admissions. He was eventually, his titles changed over the years. He was there for 40 years, but he was Dean of Admissions and Director of Financial Aid anyway. But it was admissions first and then financial aid added on. And so we were very much a education family, a college family. I feel like I grew up on the Whittier College campus. It was very much part of our life. We went, from the time I could remember, we went to football games and basketball games and homecoming and special activities and all of that. So it was a big part of my life. And again, they just assumed I would be a teacher, and I ended up being a teacher. But first I have a professor anyway, but first I rebelled a little. So it was good. My sister went to Whittier College. I went to Whittier College. My brother-in-law. So it was very much a big part of our lives. So Southern California, Whittier is in Southern California. It's it's in LA County, right on the border with Orange County. Orange County. So then when I went to work for a company in Orange County, that wasn't too far afield. So it was good. We spent a lot of time at my mother's parents. She's a native Californian, and her parents lived in the town she was born and raised in, which is Santa Maria, which is about 180 miles north of Whittier. So it's in the northern part of Santa Barbara County, right on the San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara County.
Okay.
Anyway, and so that when I say we spend winters at their family ranch, that was my grandparents. So we the family has kept that. So my brother, sister, and I own that now, and so it's where the whole family goes and spends time together, and we spent a lot of time there. So it was good. We drove up and down the coast a lot between families. So it was I had a good childhood close to my grandparents. Spent a lot, very academically related with walking. Whittier's a good walking town, so I walked to school, always walked to the public library. It was a pretty nice childhood.
So how many siblings do you have?
I have an older sister and a younger brother. So I'm the middle child, I'm the peacemaker between the two.
Okay.
So, yeah, I always sit there. My brother's quite a bit younger. He was head of the caboose. He's 8 years younger than I am.
Okay.
10 years younger than my sister. So my sister and I were very close growing up because we were just 2 years apart. I'm the only one in my family who left California. They are both still there, and their families are still in California. My sister lives in Central California, my brother still in Whittier. And so again, the family ranch is like halfway between, so that we meet there for Christmas and New Year's. Nice. And in fact, they're all trying to figure out July. Traditionally, we've all been there in July, and I'm trying to figure out if we're going to get there this July or not.
So both you and your sister must have been parental towards your brother in some ways.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And sometimes we led him astray too. I remember, running around the streets at night. Sometimes we were supposed to be babysitting, but we were old enough to babysit for him. So we have we laugh a lot because we have lots of memories of things that our parents probably didn't know we were doing with him, but it was good.
Yeah, because I have a daughter who's 13 and a half and a son who is 7. So they have 6.5 years of difference, and she is kind of parental to him. But she's 1, and you were 2 of you. So I'm thinking like, how that works.
Yes, and he I can hear him in his head, when he was little, saying, "You're not the boss of me," So he was his own guy.
Okay.
But we're still really close, and he's the only one. He rebelled. He didn't go to Whittier College, but the rest of us did.
I can hear the "you're not the boss of me" now, I think.
Yes. That's right.
No, that's amazing. And so you were in this sunny California, Southern California, and that's why I think Hawaii was kind of natural place for you.
Hawaii felt a lot more natural than Columbus, Ohio. And don't ask me how I end up in Michigan, although it's lovely right now. But we did, in the pandemic, we had to we spent a winter here. So I have spent one winter in Michigan. I bought my first ever snow pants, my first snow boots. It was interesting. I had my first ever white Christmas, because even though I was a student at Illinois, I didn't, I went home for Christmas, so I wasn't in there. Then we decided, well, that was interesting. Now let's be gone for 3 months. Right. So we were gone December, January, February, actually March, half of December, half of March. So.
And it's quite nice, amazing in a sense that a lot of people move to warmer places for the retirement.
Yeah. Right? Well, yeah. So how did I end up in Michigan? So the only reason we're in Michigan is our son and daughter-in-law both work at Michigan State University. So our daughter-in-law is a project manager with ag, the ag extension, and our son is an associate professor librarian. He is a special collections librarian at Michigan State University. So when I was thinking of retirement, I tell you, if it had just been up to me, I probably would have never retired. But I had a lot of people saying, you really need to relax and enjoy things. You've been running hard. I started working freshman in college and have been working ever since. So decided I needed to take retirement. And they were thinking about buying a house. This was a few years ago. And they said, "What, have you ever thought about retiring all of us together, you living with us?" And then then you don't have to worry about going, you don't have to, we won't tell you what to do, but you don't have to worry as you get older. That was good because we didn't know where we were going to retire. We knew eventually I'd retire, but to where? And so that solved that issue. It was very generous of them and nice. And we were able to buy a house that has separate living quarters. So we have a floor that have, we have a separate kitchen, separate everything. And then they're in a floor above. We both have our own entrances. So it's really kind of an ideal setup here. And
No,
we're
it's
right
really,
on, yeah, it's lovely. We're on the Grand River. So it was perfect for the pandemic. Oh my gosh. Because when we bought this, of course, we thought, eventually we'll move in. But the University of Tennessee, like most places, closed down March 13th, 2020, went all online. And that was the spring break, and we were coming up here to come organize things, move some furniture in, and start getting our house ready for sale, but not in any hurry. We thought we'd be here for a week, and we haven't left.
okay.
We ended up selling the house in Knoxville from a distance. We ended up getting some people to help to move our stuff up, and it was a perfect place to be. We're out in the country, and we could.
Oh, you didn't have to go back to like pack and to sell and all that?
No, did it all from a distance.
Oh, that's amazing. And yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it was a good decision.
Yeah, no, I think it's amazing to be able to be with your children, and it's nice.
Yeah, it's nice, and we're separate enough that we don't bug each other, but we're close enough. If there's something like our son today needed to borrow our car, that's kind of nice to have
Right.
that. Yeah, it works out really well.
No, thank you. This is like, I think I can still see you as a little California girl, I think, even as you're talking to me.
Well, I've always spent lots of time outside,
Right.
it's that was the other thing is I bundled up that one winter we were here because I said, I was in the place in the generation where, we were outside most of the time and you'd come inside occasionally. If it was raining, we'd take an umbrella, it wasn't a matter of being indoors. So that's kind of nice, the best of both. And hiking, we do a lot of walking. I try to walk 20 miles a week at least, and we can do that. Here in Michigan, it's flat walking. It's a whole lot easier. At our ranch in California, there isn't a flat, and it's all up and downhill. It's a little more difficult, but still we can be outside.
So now when you reflect, right, and when you think of both your life so far and at your career, what have been the most significant steps and turning points? And you can think of about your career turning points, but maybe even life events, if those are significant as well.
Yeah, they're all kind of tied up. I already mentioned deciding to get the master's degree. That's sort of that was a starting point more than a turning point because I didn't know what I was going to do. The one turning point was meeting a guy from Hawaii and deciding then that maybe if I had a job opportunity too, this was, sort of something that was a good decision. So that was definitely a turning point. And of course, so then that's personal turning point as well as professional turning point. And then the big pivot from being a librarian and working information professional into the academic world of teaching. That was a big turning point, of course. Professionally, and then of course the move from Hawaii, but research-wise, there was a turning point. So all of my early interest in research was really in the information industry. It was information retrieval systems, worked a lot with the various companies that provided information retrieval systems, did a lot of work on comparing systems, looking at retrieval performance. That was my dissertation, even looking at database development of databases, looking at publishers, all of that kind of from the systems and then writing the library journal column about that. I was very focused on the publishers, the creators, the stuff rather than the users, really focused on that. So starting to work with Don King was a huge turning point because then, as I say, that pivoted from focusing not just on the systems and the stuff that people were using, but on the people and the value it brought to their work. That was a big kind of mental pivot for me. He had done that for a long time. King Research is his company, and he retired or he closed there, sold that, retired when he moved to Tennessee, but he continued interest in that work. And he had for years been looking at what do scientists need and use in terms of information, and what value does it bring to their work. And that was the real, not just information retrieval, not just how do they get to it, but what do they use it and what value, so that's that next step. And so he had done that for a long time, but he didn't know anything about the online world, and he knew that things were changing. And I knew a lot about the online world, but hadn't worked so much with it from that perspective. So the two of us working together, that was a huge turning point in my research life and my way of thinking. And I know some of the people who really followed my early work on the database world were kind of disappointed when I got together. They've told me that forget that. Let's find out what's happening with the publishers and all of this. I tried to keep both, but it you can't balance everything, and that's one reason why after 27 years, I remember sitting at the dining room table. Don was there and my husband, Jerry, and we were sitting there and I was saying, oh, I'm doing administration, I'm doing this research, I'm doing that, the library journal column every month, and something got to give. And they both looked at me and said, you think it may be time to stop the library journal column? And they were right. I hated to give it up. But so that was a big turning point, kind of thinking about, what role does information have in a scientist's work life? What role does it have in the success of the organization? And also, what role does the publisher play in that? What role does the library play in that? What role does the system, kind of all of that more holistic view, but really focusing on the users. So that was a big kind of turning point. And that was a lot of time just spending with Don and talking about things and really kind of focusing in on what we're doing. So I've had several pivots in my life in terms of where I'm working, kind of what I'm interested in. I think another big one had to do, how long has it been? 15 years ago, maybe now, when through Oak Ridge National Lab, I mentioned that's a big part of working at Tennessee, is they had contacts with the research data community. There are several large data centers there, research data centers. They contacted us and said that, we're working with the University of New Mexico and University of California, Santa Barbara, putting together a proposal to look at research, to build a research data infrastructure, and also we want to do research on the role of research data in the lives of scientists. And seems like you'd be a good one to join us. And also it ended up being more than just me. It was several people at University of Tennessee. Susie Allard, for example. Yeah, so Susie has been working with me on a lot of those things. In fact, she's now the role that I had for many years.
So I think when you interviewed me, I think it was Susie along with you, I think, and
okay. Yeah. Well, she is still there, and she is also a chancellor's professor, and she's the research associate dean at the college too. So she's definitely replaced me. So that's good. I'm thrilled by that. So we worked on this project. It's called Data One. And it was 10 years, but of course, several years putting the proposal together. And it brought together researchers from the lab, from all over the world. And it was a pivot in the sense that it once again extended or kind of changed my viewpoint, looking at information sources and expanding that view, not just journal articles, not just published information, but what role does the research data behind the articles play in the lives of scientists? And so, and that brought together a wonderful, wonderful, huge group. That in the first 5 years, there were over 100 people involved in that. We had all hands meetings once a year, but we also had special groups that we ran. And it made all sorts of contacts and new people, and also just a different way of thinking in terms of expanding my view. So that would be another pivot place, getting into the research data world, at least part of it. We're big enough group. It's quite a meta discipline that it brings people from all different disciplines. And so that was good. That'd be another turning point.
So when you think of all of these significant turning points in your career, right? I'm not sure whether they seemed significant when they were happening or whether they are significant now when you look back at them.
Because so many of them involved a move.
Yeah. The move, right.
Oh God, the move from Hawaii to Tennessee was so hard. it took, because of moving the family and two faculty members, out of a faculty of like 7 or 8, 2 of us leaving at the same time. It was dramatic. Our son didn't want to go, so there's a change in my research. So now I can look back a little more. Okay, it was a research pivot, but it was also a life upheaval. And when you're in the middle of it, the life upheaval sometimes overshadows things. But it was the right move to make professionally, but it was hard.
So what has been the role of serendipity and maybe some other contextual factors in this in the turning points in your professional journey?
Yeah, so serendipity probably has a lot to do with it. Meeting a faculty member from Hawaii at a ASIS meeting, but also the fact that the associate university librarian at Hawaii had offered me a job before and knew me and wanted to offer me a job. So that's serendipity. I mean, you couldn't script that. That was a movie. You'd say, no way did those kinds of coincidences happen. So that's definitely serendipity. The other things are probably a little more serendipity, maybe, but context. So asked to write the library journal columns because I was recommended. So I'd been doing something. So serendipity, it combined with accomplishment, probably, if I could say that. Not so much just, oh my gosh, the winds are taking us a certain way.
Right.
So,
I think when you do something, people notice that, and then they think that she can deliver on this, and then they give you some more responsibility.
Yeah. So I had a lot of opportunities like that. And again, I think that a lot of it had to do with just taking the chance of working with a small company, knowing that I could learn a lot real fast. The other thing is we spent that first few years in Hawaii, we decided that professional development and investing in ourselves was really important. We spent a lot of our budget on travel. The travel budget in Hawaii was not great because it costs a lot to go anywhere. And we could have been perfectly happy, just not going anywhere, but we just were investing in our careers and I was investing in my future. So we set aside personal funds to do that. So one thing kind of led to another. And then I started getting, of course, a lot of invitations. And so I made that investment, and then it paid off, because then, of course, my way was paid to a lot of things. Serendipity, the one thing I can say is definitely serendipity. The other things are, I feel like I've had good fortune in things, but I've also kind of directed it a little bit, made some choices that paid off.
Yeah, I think it's kind of one thing building on the other. So it's kind of, and sometimes it's difficult to disambiguate which one is which way. And that is why even in the world of serendipity and information encountering, they talk about recommender systems and all that. So when you go to a library and you find a book by chance, it's not really by chance, because somebody has put it that way so that you can find it by chance.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and even
it's controlled serendipity,
it's controlled serendipity. So I think even when you go and buy something in a grocery store and you have those items in the front, right, and you pick those up as you're in the line to make your payment, those again are put so that those are the kinds of items which people are most likely to pick up when they are making the payments. So there is this element of I think there's a big debate as to pure serendipity versus created serendipity in some sort.
You look at information systems now, absolutely, or recommender systems, as you said. We're looking at past behavior and helping people make the right choices. And I kind of think that there has been a little bit of that in my life.
Yeah. So looking at the field overall, right? So how would you describe the information science field, and perhaps its history? And what is your own role within that field? I know you talked about search systems and some of it as you were describing your journey, but looking at the field and your role within that.
I've been thinking about this a lot because, I have an undergraduate degree in history, but I've never been an information science historian. I pivoted very much into the online world. I think one of the things that attracted me to the field in the beginning is this discipline. Sometimes it's multidisciplinary, sometimes it's truly an interdisciplinary field now. It started out with lots of different threads, so maybe multidisciplinary. So you've got, the long history of library service is one thread, which is still really important when you're looking at users and how do they get to things. The long thread of collections and collection development. You said somebody has to put that book on the shelf, or somebody had to make a decision to include it. That comes from a long history of collection development and goes back hundreds of years, thousands of years, probably. It's interesting. This is not quite as old, maybe 100 years, but Ranganathan still resonates with our students incredibly much, from that library thread of, finding the right stuff for the right user. Every book is a reader and all of this. It still resonates today. So that comes out of that strong library science field, which goes back thousands of years. Then there's also the threads of information retrieval systems, also, predating that, documentation, indexing, describing things, classification, cataloging, information retrieval, indexing, all of that, metadata, all of those kinds of threads of how do I describe an object so that a person or a person or system, whatever the system is. So there's those threads. There's the computer science threads of building the systems to make it work. And so that's something that, to me, information science is now all of those things kind of brought together in a quite lovely interrelated way, because it's looking at the systems, the objects, the people, the value that those things bring to people, all of those kinds of things together. So I think that kind of holistic view is one of the things that I have always brought to my career. So I have always looked at the whole ecosystem. So that means the publishers, the professional societies, the scientists, the libraries, all of those as a kind of an ecosystem together that are all contributing, making a contribution. And how do you look at those things together? And that's something that I've always looked at. Don said to me really early on that we're not here to tell people what's right or wrong. We're here to observe and provide the information. And I've heard our stuff quoted by commercial publishers. I've heard it quoted by librarians. I've heard it quoted by professional societies, by scientists. It's that kind of, we observe, we look at the whole system, and then people can take from it what is meaningful to them. So I think that's really the contribution of looking at the whole ecosystem. Again, that's what kind of got me started in this to begin. Have somebody tell me I can take, whatever I want to take, I can learn all different things, and realizing that's what this field is really about. It's about looking at things in that kind of way. I like that perspective. Yep. It's not narrow-minded.
And you quoted Don, this idea of right and wrong, right? And that we are simply observing. And right and wrong is very subjective in any case.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, we had been in some real. I remember at a meeting, it was probably we present. I made a lot of presentations in my life, which is pretty weird for somebody who was basically a shy person. I've given hundreds of speeches, but when you have something you want to say and something interesting, and you prepare a lot, it's easier. But I remember at some meeting, Donna and I were together, and it might have been an ASIS meeting, and somebody shot up from the audience and said, "You need to say why publishers are evil, and you need to take your pulpit and tell the world that publishers are evil." I can't even remember all the words he said. That you can't just remain neutral about this. And of course, that's a hard question to answer, because again, the answer is our role is to observe, not to draw conclusions about who's evil, who's right, who's wrong. This was a debate about rising prices and open access, those things. Yeah. So there were people who were very definitely had a stand that libraries are bad, publishers are bad, whoever is bad. And we were just saying, okay, here's a user. This is what they need. This is how they're using information. This is how they're getting it now. These are the implications for the future for both publishers and libraries and users, and also users. But attributing bad or good to something, I really didn't feel like that was our role.
Yeah, because I think it comes from this idea of who is the one, from whose point of view are you looking at it? From the end users, from the open access advocates, from the publisher's point of view, or the librarian's point of view. So it's depending on who's looking and from where things can look good or bad from their perspectives. So asking you to take a stand is basically asking you to speak from one of those communities in some way. So I have this I wrote this book on context in 2018, and I took a similar stand where how you define context depends on who is looking at it. So I have the story of the blind man and the elephant. Which part of the elephant you think is the whole elephant depends on which part is the blind man looking at. So you look at the leg of the elephant and think it's a tree trunk, that the elephant is a tree trunk, and somebody looks at the tail and says it's a snake, or things like that. It's basically or a snake or a rope. So it is that whole idea of perspectives, I think, that I found very important in trying to take any stand in one way. So people it's basically choosing sides.
Yeah.
And that too depends on the time and space, I think, because some things which were good 20 years ago may not be good now.
Yeah. And really, I just think I would much rather have the viewpoint of of an ecosystem. We're all in this together, trying to get the best information to people who need it in whatever ways. And here's what the user thinks. Here's here's the whole perspective. So tried very hard not to represent one view or another, other than a scientist.
So ecosystem is like a holistic view, right?
Yeah.
So when you look back at your life and career, who are some of the people who have influenced your work? You've mentioned Don King a number of times, but any other names come to your mind?
Well, yeah. Early, and they aren't necessarily individuals. Well, let me separate that into people I knew and worked with and were mentors, and then writers and authors, but certainly mentors. I've had a lot of really good mentors. So I mentioned Pamela Cibarelli, who was the president of that company I worked with a lot. She let me do a lot of things and gave me a lot of freedom to do that. And Don King, for sure, was a huge mentor and friend. So those were really. Also at Illinois, Linda Smith, I mentioned, Martha Williams. So I had a lot of really good mentors in my life, and which really helps a lot. As far as and they all wrote and influenced me that way. But as far as writings that helped direct my career, certainly the Cranfield studies, Cyril Cleverton and Wilf Lancaster. Wilf Lancaster was at Illinois when I went there. One of the reasons I wanted to go there. He was on my dissertation committee. We didn't work directly other than on my dissertation, but he was certainly, his work was very influential. The early Cranfield studies were very influential in what I did. His 1979 book towards paperless information systems, hard to imagine, it was very controversial. People laughed and laughed. Oh, you couldn't have paperless systems, Right. It was quite controversial. It was quite influential in my career. So those definitely. Derek DeSola Price, Big Science, Little Science, very much involved in what Don and I did together. So a big influence, not as a personal influence, but as a writing. One of Don's mentors, Fritz Smalklup, and looking at the value of information influenced our work a lot too. So his early work. So there's a lot of writers. Garvey and Griffith from Drexel, they did a lot in the early 60s. Again, not personal friends, but their writings influenced our methodology and what we did a lot. So there were quite a few personal mentors as well as just insightful kinds of writing.
So apart from these books and the mentors that you mentioned, and the writings, were there any other books that influenced maybe not your career directly, but your way of looking at life and things? Or
boy, probably a million. I read so much. That's one of my things I'm doing now, is I'm reading like crazy, catching up on all of the reading. So hard to say. I can say a favorite. As a child, The Secret Garden was my very favorite book, and it turns out that author used to live in Knoxville, Tennessee. Talk about coincidences. It's pretty amazing.
Right.
So, there are books that are influential and not necessarily, there might be fiction, something that really speaks to me. So I've read all of the classics, all of Dickens and Austen, and, all of these that really speak to me. But I mentioned Derek DeSola Prize and Big Science, Little Science from a work perspective. That's probably the most, and it's been sort of forgotten. I was surprised. It's out of print, and I was really surprised. I know that some of my colleagues and I had some research colleagues and I had talked about we should, do the next version of that, but never got around to doing it. It seemed too daunting. But there's room for another Big Science, Little Science. We did part it. I mean, we looked at the growth of journals and have done that, and my colleagues at Hanken University in Helsinki, Bo Christer Bjork, for example, who I worked with a lot. He's done quite a bit of that too, but that was probably most influential.
Okay. And any other incidents that we haven't covered so far?
I should mention the Fulbrights. I just mentioned Bo Christer. You introduced them. Huge impact in my life. I didn't do that until later in life. I didn't do that till our son was in college. But I've had 3 Fulbrights, all 3 to Finland. Finland is a big, lots of good information scientists in Finland. Finland is very influential in the information science world. And my husband is Finnish American, and he has kept touch with he has a lot of relatives and family there. So again, it was one of these personal and professional things that just came together quite beautifully. I had 2 shorter ones in 2005, I think, and 14, somewhere in there anyway, but also did some things with Finnish Academy of Science funding. And then the last year in 16-17 spent an entire year as the Nokia Distinguished Chair. And that last one in Helsinki at Hanken University. And so I got to work with their information science crew there. Great group. I've been on several I've been the lead opponent of several doctoral committees for them too. First Fulbright was in Oulu, which is way up north. And then the second was in Tampere, which is where the main information science school is. That's when they've been very active in ASIS, the faculty at Tampere. And then the last one was in Helsinki at Hanken. It means that my collaboration with European scientists has really grown. I've worked with them, but also as a Fulbright scholar, you get invited all over the area. So I was able to go and build colleagues and talk and build connections all over Europe, which in fact, I'm still lead opponent on a dissertation in Norway that's coming up. So, that building those connections has been great. My international connections, Fulbright has helped tremendously. Wasn't the only thing, but it's really been good to have colleagues from all over the world.
So when you look at, as you navigated these various aspects of your life, right? What were the key skills that helped you over the years?
Skills. So, okay, we're going to define skills, knowledge, and attitude. So skills, I think of skills.
Actually, I think skill, knowledge, attitude as well, I think.
Because skills, I think of, doing things. So clearly online searching. I was a really good online searcher in those days. Now it seems so silly and obsolete, but it was important. So, that's a skill. I was a good teacher. I loved teaching. I was a good speaker. I like doing that, but some of that goes over into attitudes and knowledge. So if you go into the attitudes, why was I a good teacher and good speaker? Because I prepared like crazy. Every speech, every class, I prepared everything. Didn't mean I always followed. The last 10 years, at least maybe 20 years, I wouldn't even look at my prepared talk, but I did it. I had it in my mind. I pictured the audience. I wouldn't ever give a speech without picturing the people in front of me. Who are they? What are they interested in? What am I saying to them? I always knew where I was going. I wrote things out even for classes. I always had notes of what were the main points, where we were going, what are we doing. So that's that's an attitude. That leads to a skill. I always prepared. That's probably part of being a shy person. You can speak as long as you know what you're talking about, but you got to prepare to make sure you really know what your aim is. So that's probably, preparation, I think is a huge part of that. Skills, knowledge, attitudes. And then also this idea of listening to everybody, looking at all viewpoints, really tried to keep that in mind what I was doing and hear what people are saying.
Yeah, so you make a number of important points. I think one is to talk about this idea of preparing but not always following, which is important in the sense that the preparation prepares you for the event or whatever you're doing, but then you're also spontaneous where you need to be, and then willing to leave aside what you've prepared.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever read a speech, but I could have. If for some reason, I didn't feel well or whatever, I always had a speech I could read, but I never did. It's enough, what you're going to go for. Now, of course, you got to be prepared, and you can't have a script for questions. So questions are always, you want it you want to be prepared enough that you can thoughtfully answer any questions that come your way. And then there are sometimes questions you can't answer, like that wasn't really a question, but the angry person that we're not taking a stand, you can't quite prepare for that. But for most questions, you can at least, go back to what you've thought about and prepared. So that's important.
And you mentioned this thing about being a shy person, right? So you were a shy person. Are you still a shy person in some ways?
It's kind of interesting because all of us have been locked away here for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And I don't mind at all. I don't mind being the hermit, but we've been on Zoom, of course, a lot. But yeah, I think deep down, yeah, I'm well, shy maybe is the wrong word. I used it, but it's probably more introverted. In an introvert who can entertain themselves is kind of happy in solitude. So I do a lot of solitude. There are 4 of us living in this house, so it's not a lot of solitude. But I'm happy hiking and reading and watching the fish jump, watching birds. I'm a big bird watcher. We have kayak, whatever. So those are all kind of solitary pursuits, and those are much more, I enjoy those much more than I would going to a party, for example.
Right.
Okay. So that's an introverted person. In my career, I have been so interested in my career, and the research is so fascinating to me personally, and conveying things to students. So there's a connection there with people. So
even when you talk about your solitary pursuits, right? I think I find 2 kinds of pursuits. One is reading and being by yourself, maybe at home doing some things, versus going out and kayaking and watching birds. And so that I think is being amidst nature in some ways, which might be part of a true nature. So
absolutely, yeah.
So there is that connection that's going on, and when you compare that with parties, right? I think a party is a place where you're not really connecting so much. It's like kind of networking, and a lot of it is superficial. So, but I'm sure you would enjoy a company of people and good friends.
Well, yes, ASIS. ASIS has always been a big part of what we've done. So I've gone to. I used to belong to Special Libraries Association too, but it's been a long time. But always ASIS meetings, and we always look forward to seeing friends and the ASIS parties. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. What do you think have been your biggest successes in life?
Boy, I should mention my son, shouldn't I? He's a wonderful person and a great librarian. So I'll have to take a little credit with Jerry for that. But also, of course, in the career, I think I've been a kind person. I think even though I didn't want to be an administrator, I think I was an effective administrator. I listened to people, but was able to make decisions. So I'm not, I can be kind, but I can also be forceful. So I think those are successes. Being able to lead, getting the research center at Tennessee going was a huge success. We bring in millions now. I helped build a user experience lab, got the funding and helped build that, and that's been a success. So those are kinds of able to look at concrete milestones, I think, in terms of both my research career as well as the leadership. So those are, I'm proud of what we've done at Tennessee. It's been University of Tennessee was great to me, but gave me the opportunities to build things, and I think we've really built on what was there. Great program, great research facilities.
So you talk about all these success milestones, right? And then you also have all the awards that you have gotten over the years, the administrative positions that you've held, and the amount of preparation that you mentioned before each of your speeches and everything that you do. There is clearly a big thread of hard work throughout, I think, right?
Yeah.
So what kept you going? I think what kept you going to work hard, keep working hard?
Love for what I was doing is a large part of it, but also, I don't want to go too psychologically analyzing myself, but I never wanted to just be okay. I wanted to be the best. So I did push myself. It was never enough just to do something. I wanted to do it well. So I think that's a large part of it is pushing. I enjoyed it. I don't mean to say it was, if you were in a position that you didn't enjoy and you pushed yourself, I think that would be tragic.
Right.
So I'm pushing myself, but in something I really enjoyed, and building networks, friends all over the world, and building collaborations and research collaborations. All of that took a lot of work, and I wouldn't have done it if I didn't enjoy it. Now, did I enjoy all the administration? The part I had to do, I did, because I felt like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it well. That definitely came from my dad. No doubt. From my dad was the one who always went back to the office at night or brought things home. And on Saturdays, I remember going into the office with him and running up and down the halls and going through his desk, but he worked a lot, but he enjoyed it.
So what phases of your life made you resilient? Like, what are the hardest and challenging times that required you to be strong and not break down under pressure?
Well, I already mentioned that the move from Hawaii was hard. It was this combination of I'm concerned about my husband's health, the son absolutely not wanting to leave, leaving people that we didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave. Again, in the long run, it was the right thing to do, but it was really, really tough. It took a year really to get over that. 2 years. The year we were getting ready to leave, and then the first year we were there. The thing that made it okay for my son. So we arrived in Tennessee on his 9th birthday. So that's in July. He got okay in January or February, the first time it snowed, and the school closed for a week because of snow. And he had never seen snow before. He had never, he had never knew that school would close. And all of a sudden, hey, it's not so bad here. So, but that was tough personally and professionally, making the connections, coming in as a new person. I came as a full professor. That's always, you have to tread a little lightly with it. It was a tough year. I'm trying to think, there was something else I meant to say. Oh, yeah, I didn't tell you the whole story. I don't know if you want to hear it, but so when I went to get my doctorate, I took a 1-year leave. And of course, you can't get a doctorate in 1 year. But I said, well, I have to go back to Hawaii. My husband only has 1 year, and I don't want to be in Illinois by myself. So I'll go back and I'll figure out a way to finish. And everybody thought that was a bad idea, but that was what we were going to do. And we had packed up our stuff and had driven. We were at my family place. In California, we were with my family in California, and I got a phone call. Turns out that the person who hired me, the person I worked for, left. She left Hawaii, and the person who came in said, "I don't know you from Adam. I'm not going to hire you. I'm not going to bring you back." So all of a sudden, I had left after a year. I had no job to go back to, but of course, and that was really tough. But it was the best thing. Again, in spite of myself, the best thing that could happen, because I went back. My husband went back to Hawaii. He had to go back to the faculty. I went back to Illinois, was able to finish all my coursework and prelims and everything. So that turned out to be a good thing. But at the time, the day it happened, it didn't feel so good, but it turned out. So we just made the best of it. So I'm one of those folks who will take a little bit of time to, just be upset and then said, okay, how do we fix it? So that's what I've done. You asked about here. There's a personality trait. After feeling sorry for yourself for a little bit, then you got to fix it. So I'm a fixer, and so that fixed it.
How much of time does the being upset last typically?
Well, yeah, it depends on how drastic so we're not talking about the death of somebody, we're talking about a life. So it lasted about a day once I tried to figure out, okay, what next? A day or two, not very long for that, because that's just okay, this door is closed and let's figure out how do we make the best of it.
When you think of these life events, right, and the ones which were hard, I'm thinking that maybe even your move to an administrator might be something that required resilience on your part to some extent, from teaching and research to taking on administrator roles.
Yeah, so that was another one. I postponed my retirement this last year because of needing to take over as the interim director. So that was my last administrative position. The first one is Director of research or associate. It's really associate dean of research, but I said I didn't want the title associate dean because it sounds too much like administrator, but that's basically what I was. That wasn't traumatic. I mean, I didn't want to do it, but that was different. And I saw what needed to be done. I mean, I like to solve things. So
Right.
I could solve it. I didn't expect to do it so long. But the director of the program, that meant I had to change my life plans. It made it a little bit easier. It's a terrible thing to say, but the pandemic made it a little easier because I did it all from right where I'm sitting here in Michigan because the university was all virtual. So I was a director on Zoom all day long. You know, I was not actually physically there. But that one was tougher because it made I had to rethink my life plan. So how long did it bother me? Less than a day, because I don't like to be miserable. So I had to cry and said, okay, how can I make this work? And it was fine. It was good because there were things that needed to be done and I could do them and I could see that. Whether I wanted to or not, I could see that. I don't think I'll do that again.
I think a lot of the times you jump onto something and you may or may not want to do it again. I'm not sure how many things, actually I've talked about this with people, and I was talking about this with my nephew recently, is that even if there have been good life events and bad ones, or whichever ones we've had, do we want to repeat them and go back to the time and relive that again, right? So I don't know what you feel about that. Like,
well, you just move forward, and we think nostalgically about Hawaii, but do we go back? No. We made that break. We needed it. We did go back once, about 4 or 5 years after we left. We went back for closure. My husband went back and taught summer school, and his health was fine then, and so so that was good for him. Go back and teach. My son, our son, needed to kind of get the closure. We went back and looked at our old house, and he went and visited his friend's house and those kinds of things. So that was a good kind of closure for that. But would we go back? We didn't go back afterwards. We've done that. We're over that. The same as here. I'm retired now, so I'm moved on and so it's don't want to regret things. But
so when you look back at some of these tougher times in your life, were they important in helping shape your life in a certain direction or in a certain way?
Oh, well, yeah, for sure, because I could see what I could do, what I could contribute, and it contributed to my growth too, in terms of resilience, but also, okay, what can I do that's beyond my comfort zone, or how can I move on that? So that works.
And you mentioned taking on this big role of interim director during the COVID time. How else did the COVID period affect you in the 2020-21? That last 2 years, the entire thing about COVID.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've got a Sloan grant that I was PI. Now I'm just co-PI because I can't have the financial responsibilities, but it's ongoing now, looking with cyber David Nicholas in the UK, who I've done a lot of things with over the years. Anthony Watkinson in the UK, which is a grant to look at early career researchers. How does COVID affecting their careers? So I've been asking a lot of people these questions, or our research assistants. So that's a question we've been asking lots of people over the last 2 years, all over the world. This is an international project. How does it affect you? So in my case, again, it's been a transition for me. So I was starting a transition anyway, and this just accelerated the transition. It made it easier for me to make the transition because I wasn't around people. It was easier to say goodbye when you don't have all these protracted parties, and
Right.
It was a matter of it kind of made things easier, and we were able to make the transition to all 4 of us living together, because we were with the 4 of us for a year. That was our pod. It made it easier, actually, which I feel a little guilty saying. But also, I think it's true of most information sciences programs. Almost all have an online component, at least in their master's program. We were in much, much better shape than the rest of the university.
Right.
And this is true at Tennessee, but everywhere, in that our faculty then volunteered to help other faculty. We had a week, spring break, to transition from in-person to online. Well, we were already online. So our faculty were able to help other faculty, help them make that transition. So it showed the leadership position of information sciences in the university, and that we were way ahead, and we were willing to help and eager to help others make that transition. So I think it was easier for us as a profession than it was for others.
Yes, and I think we had almost exactly the same thing at Simmons University, because we already had an online program, and we were able to pivot very easily. And the rest of the university had a much tougher time, and we again could have best practices and were out there to help people creating videos and reaching out and all that. And we also had a week, because the spring break was 1 week and it was changed to 2 weeks. And that's when we had to make the transition.
Yeah, so I think that's true all over the country, really. And that we really, so it was easier for us than others, for sure. Not so, and our students, and it wasn't easy on all the students, but we were very definitely, and through the leadership of the university, again, I don't think this is unique, but we were all urged to show compassion to students and understanding and be flexible in that year. And we got that message to the students, that more flexible than we would be in terms of due dates, and more and compassion. Our students are usually adults. They have complicated lives. And so speaking again of the master's students and the doctoral students more than the undergraduates. We also had an online component to our undergraduate program. So again, it made it easier for us.
Right. So what is something you wish you knew earlier in life? I know it's a hard one.
Yeah, how to say no. If I had said no to these administrative things, maybe I wouldn't have learned what I did, but I always felt obligated when I was asked to do something to say yes. I'm still learning to say no to all of the not all, but to a lot of the requests for reviewing papers and that sort of thing. I always felt if I was asked, I had to say yes. Right. So I found out, you don't always have to say yes. Writing the library journal column meant at conferences, I took copious notes and everything. I got in this habit of going to every single session all day long. And I was at a conference. Sometimes I didn't get out of the hotel because I would be at every session every time and just be exhausted. And I was after several years, and I kept doing that after the library journal. And several years after that, I was at a meeting, and I was sitting at plenary, I think, or something. I wasn't an ASIS meeting, but it was some other meeting. And I wasn't interested in what the person had to say. They weren't, particularly interesting. And I started adding up the number of hours in my life that I had sat in meetings and conferences. And I got up and left and went for a walk and saw something in the city. And I thought, you don't have to sit through every single session of every single meeting. When you go to a conference, when we get back to face-to-face conferences, you should also have some time to go to the museum, go to on the walk, go see the conference. So it took me a while to learn that one.
Yeah, so I think what you're talking about is this thing about career versus life. Sometimes it can be one, but there can be life outside of your career as well. And it's trying to feed your mind versus trying to feed your soul.
Yeah, I think so. But it's also, it's also part of career. People always said, I've heard people say, I don't go to all these meetings. I sit in the bar because you learn more in the bar. Well, I don't drink. So, what am I doing sitting in the bar? So, that sometimes I go to meet people, a scheduled event, but I'm not just hanging around. But I think that's the same sort of thing, that you can learn things in many different ways. And yes, I still learn things at the sessions, but that's not the only way to learn or to feed your soul or whatever. So I always used to tell when people said, you're going to every session, I said, well, I can always learn something. Sometimes it's content. Sometimes it's how to do a really good presentation. Sometimes it's how not to do a presentation, but I always something. But at some point I figure, okay, I don't have to go to every, don't have to stay.
I think in some ways you had a commitment for that column. So I don't know, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, and maybe you were initially excited, but at some point there was a commitment, and then you were in between commitment and a trap.
Maybe, but I also felt like I don't know, it's this idea of I'm never satisfied to just do average. I got to do more. So if 90% of the people go to 80% of the sessions, then I got to be in the top 0.5% that goes to all of them.
It goes to all of them, right?
It's all part of it,
yeah. So what are your life principles, values that you follow? Like, what are your life lessons?
I'll tell you right now, I'm not a philosopher, so I don't sit around and think about philosophy or life lessons. But but I think, keeping an open mind, making good colleagues, listening to what other people had to say, expanding on taking chances. I mean, a lot of these things, I said, oh, I don't want to do it, but it was taking a chance and doing those things. I think they've all been a big part of what I do. And then just new experiences. It took me a while to start all this international travel. And then I got, started traveling probably too much, but I loved every bit of it because I was meeting people and learning new things. So, just kind of keeping an open mind, listening to what people have to say, be interested in lots of things. And then the lesson, of course, is to know when something really isn't your strength, or you can listen to it and say, no, that's not really for me. So maybe making a decision, but listening first, I guess, has been a large part of what I do.
What does happiness mean to you?
Well, I could say watching birds and watching the river go by and with my family right now, that's a lot of happiness. We always had time to get together. So, but I suppose it's more the cliche, the kind of work-life balance. So really a successful career at something you really love, pushing hard on it, but enjoying it and taking time off when you, when it gets too much. So, spending time with family too. I never did the stay-at-home mom thing. So I don't know what that would have been like. I always balanced work and home, and it's worked really well. The fact my husband's also an academic, I think that probably helps. We have the same viewpoint and the same flexibility, but taking time off. The other thing is I've done a lot of sabbaticals. So taking advantage of your opportunities to live other places is huge. So I mentioned the Fulbrights in Finland. So we've lived in Finland, but I've also had sabbaticals in Australia. So we've lived in Sydney for large parts. I taught summer school in London. So we've lived in London many summers. So, this idea of learning new places and that's been, to me, that's happiness, meeting new people there and in context of your work has been good. I should also mention personal thing. Happiness is going to the theater and watching a good musical. I was we were for the first time, the musical theater here on campus at MSU opened up after 2-year break. And we were at a play Sunday, and I was trying to count how many plays I've been to over the years. I always, when I'd go someplace, when we're teaching or whatever, always went to the theater. And I don't know, it's been hundreds, probably, I don't know how many, but many, many hundreds. So doing enjoyable things, every place you go, doing something that's fun. And to me, that's happiness too.
So when you talk about your sabbaticals and you moved to different places, different countries, how was it with kids? Like how did they manage their schools and all that?
So that's what I said. I'm a late bloomer. We started doing a lot of this when he started college, or we split the time. So my sabbatical, when Andy was little, I had a sabbatical, but I was never. So I took the sabbatical, but I was only gone for a week or so at a time, then I'd come back. So I did that one, a lot of it in San Francisco. Well, what I did is the first sabbatical is I visited information retrieval companies, database companies. And I'd spend a week with one, but just in the US, and then come home. And then a few weeks later, then I'd go. So we didn't make him go. Now, Fulbrights are perfectly fine for people to take their kids, but we didn't do too much of that, except summer. So I also had things in summer. The nice thing about Australia, my first time in Australia is our summertime, of course, is the middle of their term. So he came with us for the summer in Australia. He liked Australia for that. So it was just gone for 3 months that first time. But the longer ones waited till he was out of the house.
Now that you're retired and you're having some of your much deserved time to read and do other things, what are your goals now?
I'm still trying to figure out how to be retired. I still wake up in the morning with this nagging feeling that I forgot to do something and that I need to do something. And so I'm still co-PI on a grant. I probably should have cut the cord completely because, there is something that, is supposed to be due, but I'm not spending, I'm not supposed to spend too much time on that. So, but I'm not in control. So I like to be in control. And, I like to be the one who knows that it's going to work. So I probably should have cut cut the cord more, but I'm still trying to figure out that balance of time and get over this feeling like I'm forgetting to do something, or I should be doing something, or I should be working. So
Right.
so I don't have, my only goal is to figure out what my life is going to be like, what my goals. It's hard right now because we don't feel comfortable traveling too much yet. We did, as I say, we spent the winter, but once we got there, we didn't, we basically holed up like hermits there. We went from one country place to another. We have canceled a lot of trips. We're still engaged with Fulbright Finland. We have canceled a couple trips to Finland in the last 2 years. It's still a kind of transition time. I don't feel comfortable traveling to Europe right now with both the pandemic and then the world situation with Russia. It's just, so I don't know right now. I have no answer for that other than like trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing.
Right. And I guess my last question to you is, what mentoring advice would you have for people who might follow in your footsteps?
Well, first of all, mentors. Mentoring advice is get good mentors. So I've been really fortunate to have a series of good mentors that don't exploit that relationship. Well, with Don's and my relationship was a little different because he was retired and we were doing, that was his whole focus, was that research. So we had a lot of time together on that. But the others are just, when I need advice more. But good mentors really help. Good connections, with helping you make decisions and helping with connections, but also helping make decisions. I mentioned sitting around the dining room table, others helping me see that, it was really time to stop the library journal column. That's a good mentor. I could have said no. So I think that's really important. I think the other thing that has brought success or happiness or whatever to my career is this idea of having something you're really passionately interested in. Started with online information retrieval, great time to get involved in that, mid 70s when it was kind of new, but something that you're really interested in, but that is broad enough and that you can recognize that you can expand it as opportunities evolve. So expand it to look at the users or the scientists, expand it to look at other kinds of information like data. So it's all kind of the same core of something I've been passionately interested in for the years as I've been, almost 50 years, know enough to how I can learn from others and expand it and working with, and the other thing is make teams work with international, if that works, certainly cross university, cross organization type, cross disciplines. That has been so valuable to have groups of people who think slightly differently and can look at things from different perspectives, build those teams. That's one reason why I still love ASIS, because ASIS is a great place to build those kinds of collaborations.
Maybe I'm thinking of one more question. When you talk about online information retrieval, right? And now a lot of the information that you get online is misinformation and fake news or disinformation that you have. So what's the take on that? Like, how can people fight that?
Yeah, so that is not an area that I really feel like I have expertise in. We have hired a couple faculty in the last 2 years that is their area, that they really look at that. So I'm looking at experts looking at expert. So I'm looking at a scientist looking at a scientific information and to help them in their work. So their background gives them some of that. But with interdisciplinary work, that does become an issue, because you may not, here I am in a project that a lot of the people are environmental scientists. Well, that's environmental science is not mine, but I have to read in that area. So how do I know? And it comes over and over and over through our work. It comes down to the brand. It comes down to the journal's name as a brand is still, and peer review is still hugely important. It's not perfect. You can tell I taught a doctoral seminar on this for several years, last thing I taught, but it's still the most important clue for those experts and scientists. Okay, it's in science. I know that's vigorously peer reviewed. I know I still have to use my brain, say, does this sound right? And the data behind it helps too, if you can look at, see the bigger picture. But that kind of, the kind of branding still is really important even for experts, for sure. So journal names as brands are still important.
So is there anything else that you wanted to add and that I didn't ask you?
Oh, gosh, yeah, who knows? It's been who knows what. I always think of everything, but it's been great. It was hard for me to retire. I been thinking about it, again, my husband's older than I am, and we wanted to have some flexibility. They always say, it's time. Well, after being an administrator again for the last year, then I knew it was time, but it was time to give other people an opportunity as well, I think. And I feel good about what I've done there, but I'm still working out on what the next phase is going to be.
Right. So thank you so much, Professor Tenopir. This has been amazing, I think, and thank you so much for your openness and also your advice to be open. So thank you.
Well, and thank you for reminding me about our earlier interview and for turning the tables on me this time.
No, I'm so glad I got to speak to you. I think it was really nice hearing all about. I'm sure there are so many lessons that people listening to your interview can get from your life and what you've done so far.
Thank you so much.
So thank you.